Number 9. Demi Burton. In May of 2019, a young British woman wrought havoc on a flight from Abu Dhabi to her native Manchester, and it took multiple people to restrain her. 20-year-old Demi Burton's chain of inappropriate outbursts began when she propositioned several male flyers to join her in the Mile High Club while intoxicated on red wine. When she was denied more alcohol, Burton demanded to see the captain. That request was also denied, at which point she raised her fist in front of a flight attendant, reportedly shouting that they should land the plane. A violent struggle ensued, in which it took 6 passengers and cabin crew members to restrain the young woman. A consultant anesthetist was bitten on the elbow and head-butted by her, and would later refer to the experience as being worse than working in the ER. Burton also head-butted a flight attendant and bit her on the forearm. Others sustained kicks to the ribs and face. She continued to act disruptively after being restrained, but began to tire out and calmed down after a passenger, who was a prison warden, had a talk with her. Burton was arrested at the end of the 8-hour flight and subsequently jailed for 6 months on various charges that included 5 counts of assault. Number 8. Unnamed Russian woman. In 2021, a Russian passenger was tied to her seat with rope, duct tape, and a seatbelt after taking off her clothes while wandering aimlessly around the cabin. Shortly after the plane had departed from Vladivostok, the unnamed 39-year-old woman got up from her seat, displaying erratic behavior. She started removing articles of clothing, including her underwear, and then putting them back on again. Cabin crew had repeatedly asked her to stop, but she ignored them entirely, fearing for her own safety as well as that of other travelers. The plane's crew teamed up with some of the passengers to restrain the woman in her seat. She remained tied up for the rest of the flight and was arrested after the plane landed in Novosibirsk. Upon questioning, she admitted taking a synthetic drug prior to boarding the plane and faced low-level charges of petty hooliganism. Number 7. Vitali. In 2017, a heavily inebriated Russian man exhibited threatening behavior on a flight from Moscow to Barcelona. Only identified as Vitali, the 22-year-old wanted to smoke a cigarette on the plane and became enraged when the flight crew told him it wasn't allowed. He started screaming and insulting the Russian people, even though he was also Russian. Fed up with the verbal abuse, one passenger approached Vitali and punched him square on the chin. It was at that point that he sat down and promptly fell asleep. The pilot was reportedly on the verge of making a forced landing, but then abandoned that course of action once Vitali calmed down. It's unclear what legal action Vitali or the passenger that had hit him faced, but the former did apologize for his behavior. One passenger was quoted as saying, "Shame that he got punched only once." Number 6. Unnamed Chicago women. In March of 2021, a brawl broke out at Florida's Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. It happened after 2 women who refused to wear their masks forced an entire cabin to deboard. In spite of the clear pandemic safety guidelines, the passengers chose to keep their masks off. As the police escorted them through the gate, they were booed and mocked by frustrated passengers. The pair became more irate as they walked through the crowd. They ultimately got into an argument with another group of women. One of the alleged anti-maskers taunted a woman from the opposing side to hit her. A fight broke out with them striking each other and various items flying about. One of the women ended up on the ground with the other, choking her and pulling on her hair. The fight was stopped by the police and everyone involved was detained and led out of the terminal. Number 5. Landon Greer. In March of 2021, an Alaska Airlines passenger faced a maximum term of 20 years in prison, as well as a $250,000 fine for interfering with the flight crew and attendants, considered a federal charge. 24-year-old Landon Greer was flying from Seattle to Denver, but before boarding, he'd had a few beers and several shots. During the flight, a passenger called an attendant to Greer's seat as he had urinated on himself. Other crew members arrived to assess the situation and repeatedly told Greer to wear his mask. It was at that point that he struck one of them. He would later tell the FBI that he had no memory of urinating in his seat or of swatting the attendant, and that he'd awoken to the attendant shouted at him about the mask. Greer was arrested and later released on a $10,000 bond. Number 4. Luton Airport Brawl. In May of 2021, a massive brawl broke out at London Luton Airport that ended with 3 people being hospitalized. It began as an exchange of words between women in the group, most of whom were Romanian nationals, with their ages ranging from 20 to 55. After a man insulted one of the women, he was struck in the back of the head with a bottle thrown at him by another male passenger. As the fight broke out, the men started punching, kicking, and hitting each other with suitcases in the airport's shopping area. They clambered over the chairs and one of them tried to use a bin as a weapon, but then discarded it. Surveillance footage captured one man being repeatedly stomped on as he lay on the ground. Passengers that weren't involved in the altercation shouted at them to stop in a brawl that lasted around 5 minutes, until security finally intervened. In the aftermath, 17 people were arrested, 11 of whom were charged. A spokesman for Luton Airport apologized to bystanders who were affected by the brawl and reaffirmed the airport's zero-tolerance policy towards such incidents. Number 3. Chloe Haynes. In June of 2019, a British passenger was accused of causing absolute chaos in the sky on an airplane bound for Turkey. Since the plane was still on the runway, 25-year-old Chloe Haynes had reportedly been hurling verbal abuse at other passengers while downing a bottle of gin. She then sent a cabin crew member flying across the aisle. With the plane at a cruising altitude of about 30,000 feet, Haynes ran to the front and tried to open one of the emergency exits, screaming, "I am going to kill you all." Former security guard Steve Brown tackled her and then pinned her down with the help of other passengers. Haynes continued to punch and kick them as they tried to restrain her. They eventually put an end to the rampage that had endangered the lives of the 206 passengers aboard the plane. However, by that point, the pilots had already raised the alarm. Sonic booms echoed across the East Coast as 2 RAF Typhoon fighters arrived at either side of the passenger plane and guided it back to Stansted. Haynes was arrested but claimed she didn't remember much of the incident after mixing alcohol with medication. She was given a jail sentence of 2 years. Today's topic was requested by Dino Aviation Orca 1290. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Brawl at Miami International. In April of 2021, several passengers started fighting each other at Miami International Airport over the lack of seats on a flight to Chicago. At the American Airlines terminal, 20-year-old Jamil Tremaine, DeQueer, and 3 others were told that only 3 standby seats were available. DeQueer's group was given a choice of catching a later flight together or of one of them staying behind. The gate agent then asked 3 other passengers if they wanted the seats, and a verbal confrontation ensued between them and DeQueer's group. The argument turned physical, and 2 separate brawls broke out with the standby passengers repeatedly punching and kicking each other. One of the men ended up on the floor and covered a woman with his body as they were repeatedly stomped on. After the fight was broken up by other passengers, Miami-Dade police arrived at the scene and remained there for more than an hour, but none of the 7 wanted to press charges. One victim was treated at the airport for injuries sustained in the fight, while DeQueer was arrested for disorderly conduct. Number 1. Pacific Airlines Flight 773 tragedy. The crash of Pacific Airlines Flight 773, which occurred on May the 7th of 1964, remains the worst instance of mass murder to have taken place in the history of modern California. Francisco Gonzalez, a 27-year-old warehouse worker from San Francisco, had become depressed and disturbed over marital and financial troubles. In the week preceding the crash, Gonzalez would constantly refer to his looming death, and he bought a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum revolver. He privately told a friend that he would use it to shoot himself. Before boarding a flight to Reno, Nevada, he purchased $105,000 worth of life insurance with his wife as beneficiary. At the San Francisco airport, he spent the following night gambling in Reno and told a casino worker that he didn't care how much he lost, as it wouldn't make any difference after tomorrow. The next morning, he boarded Flight 773 bound for San Francisco with a scheduled stop in Stockton. It was there that 2 deplaning passengers reported Gonzalez was seated right behind the cockpit. About 10 minutes after the Fokker F-27 Friendship airliner had left Stockton, Gonzalez got up from his seat, burst into the cockpit, and shot both pilots. Captain Emmett Clark was killed instantly. From an altitude of 5,000 feet, the F-27 entered a steep dive at an airspeed of nearly 400 miles per hour. Wounded First Officer Ray Andres made a frantic last transmission and a desperate attempt to stabilize the plane. A sharp climb was registered by the flight recorder. Andres' final word would later be deciphered in a laboratory setting as, "I've been shot. We've been shot. Oh my God, help!" It was at that point that Gonzalez most likely shot him again. before turning the gun on himself. With both pilots dead, the F-27 entered a final dive and crashed into a rural hillside near Oakland, erupting in flames upon impact. All 44 people on board were lost. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend a 12-hour flight next to a crying baby or listening to the same song over and over again? Let us know in the comments section below.